You know what? I think we're close enough. Let's go ahead and get started. So, all right. So if you guys are here for the 3D printing panel in Cosplay, you're in the right place. One warning: this panel should probably more be appropriately called "Why 3D Printing is Not That Great" or "Why 3D Printing Sucks." Basically, the tech, as I said, this is not a good start to the presentation. You're about to find out why. So the problem is 3D printing as a technology is probably one of the most overhyped technologies. And we'll start the 3D printer here. It's actually one of the most overhyped technologies in the last few years. I think the only thing that's probably more overhyped is probably cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is so overhyped, and this is also so overhyped. And the truth is nothing from what you've seen in the media, even news outlets. We're going to define 3D printing in this case. So 3D printing has been around since the 1960s. It's actually a fairly old technology, and there's lots of different kinds of 3D printing. They all developed in that 1960s and 1990s era. And here's the thing: the reason why you guys haven't heard about it until now is because they're all patents protected in the United States, and they didn't start expiring until about the 2000s or so. So we're going to define 3D printing as this. So 3D printing is an additive manufacturing process, stacking layers of materials to create an item. So as an example, the common example is like a layer cake. You know, if you stack layers of cake, you make a bigger cake. A book, you know, you stack a bunch of sheets of paper to make a book. So 3D printing works kind of the same way. So as I said, there are many different kinds of 3D printing. The most common variant, you'll see it under two different terms. The first term is fused deposition modeling, and the second term is fused filament fabrication. They mean the same thing. It's just that the first one is actually trademarked by the company that holds most of the patents for this variant of 3D printing. So Stratasys is the company that developed this method of 3D printing, and it's the most common variant that is seen today. If we have time, we can talk about the resin printers. There's actually two types of resin printers out there, printing methods out there, and it is a totally different process. And you can see it starting to print. That was just it heating the extruder. All right, so whenever let's say I want to print a 3D object, okay? I want to print something. So you will be going through this workflow, okay? You'll first get a model, you get a model, or you will model the thing you want to print. You will then slice it so the printer can accept it. Then you'll actually print it. And then afterwards, you have to do some sort, the object will not be in a shape that you can use at that point. You will need to do some sort of post-processing, okay? All right? Before we go on, any questions before we start getting into the nitty-gritties? Yes?
What do you mean by slicing?
So what happens is the printer needs to know how thick a layer has to be, has to know what the layer looks like. That's slicing. It's essentially taking this block, let's say this is the block you're going to print. The slicer basically takes your model and slices it into lots of layers for a printer to use. Yeah. The reason why I consider separate as part of the workflow because it's actually surprisingly difficult to do. All right, so before you can do any type of 3D printing, you have to have a model for it somewhere. This is fundamentally one of the biggest things that people mess up on is, oh, I want to buy a 3D printer, and oh wait, I have no models for it. I have to pay extra for the models, or I have to make my own models, things like that. So you have to have a model. You can't just get a printer and just print. Yes.
What are your thoughts on more accessible, like cheaper in the 3D printers like you see at the craft stores like Joann's and Michael's?
We'll talk about that in a bit. Because there's, okay, as I mentioned, I'm going to try to keep this panel brand neutral. I used to keep panels brand neutral, but this is the one exception to this rule because I have one big not to get and just general suggestions. All right. So, so as I said, the most 3D printers use this STL format for the input for the 3D modeling program for the slicer. That format is pretty universally recognized. So so that's something that you can do regardless of the printer or the slicer. Right, so there's several paths to getting this model. Let's see. Okay, so let's say you are. My favorite example is Overwatch. All right, or Pokemon. Since they're very popular fandoms, someone has already. It's very likely someone has already done the model for you. They're like, oh, let's post this model on the internet for internet credit or something like that. And oftentimes, you know, if you are doing it from a very popular fandom, you will find a model very easily. And oftentimes they're just about ready to print. It just needs a bit of work from the slicer. So just look for, if you're on Google, just look for STL files, whatever you want to print, like for example, Diva's gun or a Pokeball or something. There are some folks that do charge for these pre-made models. You'd be aware of that. If it's popular enough, you probably can fairly easily find a cheap model that's for free. So kind of examples, as I said, I mentioned Overwatch. Like I know there are multiple people that have done multiple versions of like very older Overwatch weapons and things like that. Final Fantasy seems to be pretty popular, like, you know, and then Pokemon. Like I've lost track of how many Pokeballs and Pikachu figurines I've seen over the years. So as I said, those are pretty easy to find nowadays. All right, so let's go to the next best thing. All right, let's say you want to do something video game specific, and it's like a 3D game, and it's done with a relatively standard game engine. If you are familiar, people here are probably familiar with Unreal Engine or the Unity engine. The Fire engine is a Sony engine that's used starting from the PS3, and it's used for a lot of the games on the PS3 and the PS4. And the models on these are very well known. They are relatively standardized. So there are tools out there to basically pull the models off. Like if you want to make it like a nice weapon, you can pull the 3D models off of that. However, there's one catch to this. Due to the way how game programming works, these models usually tend to be very leaky. Basically, there's a lot of holes in it. When you're doing 3D printing, your model cannot have any. When you do 3D printing, your model cannot have any holes whatsoever, or else most slicers will complain and basically tell you to try again. So even if you get these models, you may have to do some repair to it. I personally have never took this approach because, but I know of many other cosplayers that have taken this approach and basically have come up with some very game-accurate weapons out there. So this is definitely a path to take. So I'm going to just list a couple examples. The Witcher would be a good example of this. Dark Souls, Demon Souls, you know, same style of engine. And the Atelier series of interest to several people in this audience. Atelier uses the Fire engine, started from Rowena, and someone actually took the time and literally extracted every single model of every 3D model from the games. So theoretically, you know, that solves my problems, but it doesn't for me. So, as I said, there are tools out there that can fix these leaky models, but it's a lot of it's pretty manual and whatnot. And I'm not going to cover those specifically, but there are tutorials out there on how to do that. All right, so What if I have something very, very, very obscure?
You have to have models.
Yep, you have to model. Okay, so no one has a model for what I want to make. What do I do? So, okay, so when I was a kid, like, you know, when I was 20 years ago, CAD software was kind of crummy, and requires very, very expensive computers, expensive monitors, things like that. And now with the improvement of computer technology and also the software in general, and also there's lots of free open source software, free or open source software out there that you can do computer-aided design for models. So it's kind of fortunate that consumer 3D printing has actually now become available at this time, because if you tried to do it 20 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to get a model. You would have to basically pay thousands and thousands of dollars to get a computer and the software for the models. Now it's completely different. So if you go this route, you don't want to see the slide. Do you try to find software that does what we call parametric modeling? Basically, what you can do is you can set the model, elements of the model to basically change based off of a parameter that you set, and you can literally just literally scale it, and then everything scales the correct way. And so, kind of examples of good software packages that are free for the most part or open source. I assume, does anyone know about Autodesk Fusion 360? Okay, you know about it. It is free for non-commercial use. So it is free for hobbyists. It is not free if you're using it as a business, but it is free for people like me who are just hobbyists and just want to play with model. It's actually very powerful, and there are lots of good tutorials out there to help show you how to use it. There's Blender, which I have several other friends that have used. I personally have used this as well. It's open source, works a lot like Fusion 360, kind of the same CAD concepts. And my favorite out of all this is a programming package called OpenSCAD. It works like a programming language. I can say a command that says I can type in a line of code that says put in a cube at this coordinate, and do stuff with it. So this is also open source. It is a little bit more. It does run into limits much faster than the other two pieces of software, but if you're getting to that point, that model may not be better suited for the other two pieces of software anyway. And as I said, all of these pieces of software, you don't need a very powerful computer running any of these. The cheap computer you get at Best Buy is more than adequate for this purpose. And as I said, these software packages, there are lots of great tutorials on YouTube and blog sites and things like that that will kind of show you the ropes on how to use all these pieces of packages of software. And you don't have to take classes for any of this stuff. So, all right, so let's say you are Veruca Salt. You don't want to learn how to do 3D modeling, but I want a model of this obscure item and I want it now. Sorry, when I wrote this, I was actually thinking. I realized it sounded like Veruca Salt, so that's why I just did it like this. Like any other hobbyist community, there's always people out there that are willing to sell services for you. I think Etsy definitely has a few people that selling like 3D modeling services, and there's like Facebook groups and things like that. However, the one problem is that this, like commissioning an artist, like commissioning someone to sew your clothing, this 3D modeling is actually a very special skill, and so there are actually college degrees just based off of this. So you should expect to pay professional prices for them. I've seen anywhere from $20 to $100 per hour per model. Yes?
When I was looking to make my Alice Madness Returns,
Yeah.
there was somebody on Etsy who was willing to do it. It would be $400 because they're going to build it from the game.
Yeah.
They have to convert it from the game from 2011 to something that their program can do.
Yeah.
And just the engraving alone is going to take several weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was saying there's a lot of ways of engraving on the knife.
Yeah.
And then there's moving that to the printer.
Yeah.
And the knife is like
Yeah,
And she'd have to like cut it in half because hers wasn't very big
Mhm.
and put the model together.
yeah.
Well, that would really cool.
I will say is $300 for that is a steal.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
$300 is a steal. Most people will charge thousands of dollars for that, just for that. If you have a lot of money to spend, this is a route you can take. Like for example, Veruca salt in the fact that she's spoiled. But let's don't talk about Veruca salt anymore. So, all right. Before we go on to slicing, any other questions? Okay, so let's go to slicing. So let's say now you've got a model. Now you've got to take this model and actually basically slice it to, you basically take the model and slice it into layers and then interpret the layers in a way that a 3D printer can print. So you're essentially cutting it and basically generating the commands for a 3D printer to actually do the work. So also on top of that, a lot of slicers can do some very limited repairs on model. Let's say you made a very small error on the model and there's a small hole, there's a small leak. A lot of slicers can actually fix very minor leaks, but they can't fix major ones. So basically, one of my colleagues, the one time I actually did a commission, 3D printing commission for, as I don't do commissions on this stuff for lots of reasons. So this story is one of them. So he had this little turtle thingamajig turtle shaped thingamajig that he was going to make for his wife, so she could do some like glass crafts with it. But when he did the modeling of it, he forgot one vertex, and that vertex literally destroyed the whole model. The slicer literally completely choked. It took us 5 iterations to find that one vertex and finally get something printed. So that's the risky. That's why I don't do that. I don't do take risks for this because that's why I don't have my own business, because you get models that do not print, that slices will choke. If your slicer chokes, it's not going to the printer. So slicing is actually very, very important because your slicer settings will often make or break a 3D print. Because it basically does the commands to control the printer, and if you give poor commands, your print will fail.
Don't most printers come with their own slicing software?
Yes, a lot of them do have a suggested software that will either provide with it or they'll provide it for a very low cost. The printers I use fall into that, or they can be controlled using open source software. So there are probably about 10, 15 different pieces of software out there for slicing. A lot of them you got to pay quite a bit of money to actually do it. I personally I've used 3 different slicers at once to try to determine things. So, because certain slicers, because of the way they're written, they do better with certain objects. Like, for example, MakerBot's built-in slicer program with their MakerBot software, they do support structures better, for example. The one I mostly use these days is Cura Slicer, and that works very well for a lot of my cases. But there are a few cases where I have to use the other slicer programs to actually get better results. So as I said, these are all examples of free or open source software. There's a lot of software out there that you will have to pay a nominal amount for. I think Simplify 3D is about $80 now. That's another one out there. I tried my best not to spend as little money on this as possible, as per usual for a cosplay. So, because cosplayers, they like to not spend a ton of money. So the other thing is even the expensive software you have to pay, they don't necessarily work that well either. So you're better off just using free software that works just as well. Right. Before we go on, I didn't really ask, how many people in this audience have 3D printing experience? Okay. So a lot of stuff I'm talking about will make a lot of sense. So, as I mentioned previously, the people that came in late, this is not a marketing spiel. This is meant to basically treat 3D printing in a realistic light and to show people that it is not a magic tool. It does not solve all your problems, but it's a good tool if you know how to use it. So when you're using the slicer, you'll basically set some parameters to basically do the slicing, and a lot of it is printer specific. How many extruders do you have? How hot do you want to extrude? How big is your print bed? What is the size of your nozzle? Things like that. So you'll be getting a lot of information. A lot of print slicer programs will have some preset settings for various printers and things like that. Settings for various printers, various qualities and things like that. But here's the catch. There is no universal set or forget slicer settings. Your slicer settings will be specific to your project. You will have to often experiment with what slicer settings work good for you. The bad thing about this also is often you will not know you screwed up your slicer until you print it. And you gotta figure out why it fails. Often the failure case, when a print fails, you can easily figure out why it failed. You can also pretty easily determine if it's a hardware or software failure once you've done this for a while. So, remember what I said about 3D printers is that it basically stacks up. It stacks layers of materials upon layers upon material. Your printer cannot print in midair. It does not work that way. Actually, I take that back. There are printers that will print in midair, but they are way beyond anybody's budget in this room. So there are some helper structures that you can use to help with your printing. One of them is used for like just adhesion to the build plate, and those are rafts or brims. The main difference is it's just like what you probably if you look at the 3D printing right now, you probably saw it it actually made a raft. That's the first thing I did. That basically helps with adhesion there, and the object sits on top of the raft. So once the raft is printed, the actual object actually gets printed itself. Brims are different from rafts. They do the same thing. They basically create more surface areas for adhesion, but they're actually printed around the bottom of the object. So you'll just peel them off when you remove the objects. So support structures. So remember, 3D printers cannot print in midair unless you have a very, very expensive one that is out of anybody's menu range. So what happens is if you're printing something like, let's say you're printing this microphone in this configuration.
That's why you need a support structure.
So here's the thing. You start here, this is okay, and it gets to here. This is supporting in midair. The printer, you have to support layer with another piece of a layer. You can't do that. You can't do it in midair. So what happens is the slicer pouring will generate these structures, like they're kind of like little lines or squares that they just go up as this goes. And once it gets to this point, you get to this section, there's actually something to support it with. This generating support structures is actually one of the last patents that has actually expired. The process of creating a support structure was actually patented by Stratasys ages ago. So now, a lot of times I actually despise support structures because they're actually a pain to remove. So what I try to do is I try to orient the object to use as few support structures as possible. So a lot of times it's not possible. It's not possible, and I just have to take it. But most times you can orient it correctly. All right. So before we go on to the actual printing of this, any questions? Okay. so okay, we're actually doing pretty well so far. So, all right, so okay, so you slice up your model. Now, as part of slicing your model, you have to tell the slicer what printer you have. And like what its characteristics. So obviously for this panel we're going to be focusing on FDM printers, which is this is an example of. It is the most common type of 3D printer you will find. It is also the cheapest type of 3D printer you will find. Yes. I've seen stuff for $100. I've seen some really crummy ones for $100. Prices do go up based off build size. It's like anything CAD, CAM related. The bigger your build area, the more higher the prices get. This printer here that you see up here, the MakerBot Replicator 2, I bought this 7 years ago. It was $2,400.
It's still too great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even the kit not assembled is pretty much for something.
Yep. Yeah, I'll talk about kits in a bit. So, yeah, because that is a good point. So you have a printer. This is an example of a MakerBot, one of the newer ones. So it has several parts to it. So it has a place where it holds the actual filament that you print with. It gets fed into this tube, which goes to an extruder. Okay. This extruder is controlled with various mechanisms to basically move it along the X and the Y axis. And there's a build plate here that basically is your Z axis. So basically, depending on the using the location of the extruder and the location of the build plate, it will determine where it is printed. So the mechanisms themselves are actually fairly simple. It's actually relative. The actual mechanisms that actually move the extruders are actually pretty reliable. The extruders themselves are not, unfortunately. So that's kind of a thing here. So remember when I said this is the one panel where I will be telling people not to buy specific products. Do not buy a MakerBot. I am serious. This MakerBot Replicator 2 is the last good printer they made. Okay. So long story short, I could spend hours talking about this. So the 3D printing community that was not controlled by Stratasys at that time had a very rich source of being open source, and MakerBot was part of that. When I bought it, this was right before Stratasys bought out MakerBot. And once they bought it out, they basically made it relatively non-open source, and they basically screwed the printers in a way that made it very consumer friendly. You can look up the fiascos involving the Smart Extruder. So when Stratasys did their commercial 3D printers, so if something fails and you are a company that has a ton of money, what Stratasys did was they basically just ship you another extruder right then and there, and they charge you for extruder. Or something else was they just charge for component, and most companies just ate the cost. But they basically, when Stratasys took over MakerBot, they tried to make the MakerBot printers like that. It basically made the printers super expensive, and they were no longer maintainable, and basically the printers are now complete garbage and are not going to buy anymore. Most other printer companies are a lot better, make a lot better printers than MakerBot do. So, okay. So aside from that one exception, as I said, there's just kind of general guidelines for buying. So, as I mentioned, the bigger the build area, the more the price increases exponentially. So I have 3 3D printers at my house, and this is one of them. The other one I can't bring because that printer is about as big as the bottom of that tripod. Yeah, It is considered that printer would be what we consider a large format printer. But I bought that 3 years ago. No, wait, let me count back. Sorry, 4 years ago. Sorry, I bought that 4 years ago, and that printer that printer at that time was $1,000. It was a kit. So, all right, some of these are my own personal recommendations. If you're looking at the build area, prioritize the build plate area over how high you can print. It's once you get higher up, the harder it gets to print. Basically, your likelihood of your print failing increases as you go up. So, I would focus on something that has a large build plate in a short height versus the other way around. One of the 3D printing gimmicks that you'll see is a dual or a multiple extruder or a mixing extruder. Avoid those unnecessarily increase the cost of a printer, and if they are not calibrated just right, which they almost never are. When you switch between the extruder, the plastic that is already extruded shrinks just enough that it will delaminate right at that point. So the main good use for like a dual extruder is for separate plastics, but I don't even do that because processing that plastic is a mess and all sorts of weird things happen. Do not use a warranty to determine what printer you provide. You are going to be voiding if you use a 3D printer for any period amount of time, you will be voiding that warranty very quickly. You're going to be making modifications to it, you're going to be fixing it, you're going to be taking it apart. It doesn't matter how expensive a printer it is, you will end up having to do your own repairs. So avoid warranties. Certain printers have like enclosures, like plastic or metal enclosures on the outside of the printer that are like totally enclosed. They're not necessarily required, but if you are working in a very, very drafty room or if you're printing ABS, they're actually helpful. None of my two FDM 3D printers have enclosures. I don't print much with ABS these days because ABS is better for other. ABS plastic is not really the best application for this. So she was talking about kits. They're like most 3D printers come pre-assembled, but some actually come as a kit where you can just install it and you can often save anywhere from 20 to 50% off the price of the printer. To basically assemble a 3D printer as a kit, you need some familiarity with hand tools and a little bit with soldering skills. But otherwise, they're actually fairly easy to set up. And as I said, even with a pre-built printer, you will be opening it up, voiding warranty to dealing with jammed extruders, for example. That's actually the most common issue that facing 3D printers. So with a 3D printer, you got to actually feed it with some sort of filament, some sort of plastic. There are a lot of different materials you can print with 3D printers, but these PLA, ABS, and PETG are the 3 most common plastics that you'll see because they're the 3 easiest to print. So what I have in this printer loaded now is PLA. So PLA is the easiest material to print because it requires a relatively low temperature. It is higher than like Warbler or Sintra, but it is lower than almost any other material. It is very tolerant of an extruder being sloppy with temperature. It is also very tolerant if your room is very drafty. So it's very, very easy to print with. But the one downside to this is that PLA is the most difficult one to finish, and I'll talk about it in the post-processing steps. and that actually is big. So ABS is the hardest material to print out of the three, but is the easiest to finish. But ABS, there actually has been some studies about 3D printing with ABS filament, and it turns out that ABS actually produced 3D printing with ABS causes it causes toxic particles to be blown into your air. So if you use ABS, you'll probably need some sort of enclosure, or alternatively, you'll need to find some way to vent all the toxic crud out of the room. It also smells like crap. Yeah. Also, because it is also the highest temperature, it requires the highest temperature out of the three. A lot of the cheaper printers can't do ABS for that exact reason. It's not the build plate. It's usually the extruder. PETG is actually the newest of the three common materials. It's kind of in the middle in terms of temperature and how easy it is to print, but it has the biggest downside to PETG is that you cannot glue it unless you have very, very specialized glues that are just as toxic. I've only found one glue that works, and that glue requires me to wear a full protection of breathing protection. So this is so basically there are a lot. If you go on Amazon these days, you can find dozens and dozens and dozens of filaments out there. General advice, okay, so remember, I am a cosplayer, not someone who actually just does 3D printing as a hobby. A lot of folks that do this just as a hobby, that do 3D printing as a hobby, they like using all the weird color filaments and do stuff with them. I do not, because I actually will paint over all of them. So, in general, stick to natural color filament. So it would be for PETG, it would be clear. And then it's kind of a whitish beige for ABS. The reason is because if you add any sort of a colorant to a plastic, it does affect its properties, and it affects its strength. It also affects its melting temperature. And also very important, do always avoid black filament. Because of the color, people like, a lot of filament companies like to hide impurities in the filament with it, and those impurities will cause your printer to jam, will cause the extruder to jam. So, you will basically have to, again, like slicer settings, you will have to experiment with filaments, and there are ways to kind of tune your printer just very quickly to a filament. Once you find out a setting that works, a lot of slicers will actually you can save it like a profile. Say, this printer with this brand of this type of filament, and you will have a setting that works for that filament. The most common filament diameter you'll see is 1.75 millimeters. There's also 3 millimeter filament, but it's less common. So, how many of you guys here are local here and went to the Austin's Fry's Electronics location in the last year or so? Okay, nobody. All right, so everyone knows that Fry's is on its last legs, and they have almost no stock in the stores. Yeah, so Fry's actually at one point did have a lot of 3D printing stuff, and I often did go to it for like emergency purchases of film and things like that. So I went there about a couple weeks ago, and I walked over to the 3D printer section. The only filament that was done was 3 millimeter filament. It was just sitting there. Basically, if you had this or this printer, you can't use it. So yeah, as I said, there's a little funny side note, but as I said, all right. So we were briefly talking about leveling. Come on. So leveling is definitely very important. This particular printer here has 3 thumb screws underneath it that basically I rotate to basically get it level. There's a little program in the printer that does it for you, that basically puts the extruder in a certain place and you do some stuff to level it. Many of the newer printers do have some sort of auto leveling, but you should still, as they say in the, in government work, trust but verify. Even though it says it's level, it may not quite be. You may have to make a couple of minor adjustments. Now, a lot of build plates are not entirely flat, so even if you get it perfectly level, you'll still have issues. Often, this is actually why with this printer, I will print a raft, because the raft also assists with the leveling issue. Because what happens, eventually will, as it goes up, it will be level, truly level in terms of how the printer sees it. Okay, I've told a few people, how long do you think this print is going to take?
2 hours.
It's something about yay big.
Maybe an hour.
An hour. That's actually correct. It's going to take about an hour to print this. In general, the slower to print, the better the results. You don't have to use as high as a truer temperature. Also the faster you print, the less likely the print's going to fail. But even the fastest prints out there take a long time to print stuff. So I was actually talking with a guy that does specialize in props, and I was showing this stuff, and I told him it took me 300 hours to print this particular prop. If you made it with wood, how long would it take? And his response was a little bit non-committal, but it was definitely it would not have taken him 300 hours to do a large prop that size with wood. But as I said, this is why 3D printing will not solve your armor problems. It will not solve your prop problems. In fact, it is much. If I tried to do that armor with a 3D printer, it would have taken me 100 hours, 200 hours just to print all that alone. You could probably have done that in probably a week.
Can't really imagine how uncomfortable it would be to solid plastic.
Yeah. I'll show you something about that. Okay. All right. So let's channel Veruca Salt again. 3D printers are too expensive, too hard to use, but I want 3D printed parts. What do I do? Okay, so as with the modeling stuff, there's folks that basically will offer the 3D printers up for printing, and kind of like, and the Shapeways and Make XYZ are two companies that kind of do this. But again, with this stuff, you will be charged the cost of the filament and the time that's spent on the printer. A lot of folks who actually do 3D printing just as a hobby, and not just for other practical purposes, they usually do things like this to kind of offset the cost of the printers. But as I said, people like sending models that can't be printed or are so big, and they have to figure out how to print something that big, and that's why I don't put my printers up for this. All right, so this is a huge section of volume printers. So any questions before I go on to the post-processing? Okay, so that's too far. Okay, so the finishing work. So this is, okay, remember that little diagram I had in the back, there's 4 steps. So we've gone through the modeling, we've gone through the slicing, we've gone through the printing. Now, let's say the 3D printer has finished its model. How far is that one?
That's how it's all supposed to be.
Yeah. What percentage?
Is it like a medallion, or?
It's like a medallion, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've probably got 3/4 inch material built up.
No, let me just double check.
Yeah, I mean, it's rough to say from here.
Oh, 70%. That's not bad. Okay. By the time we finish with this panel, this will have finished. Yeah. Okay, so once you finish once that thing comes off the printer, we can, a lot of this will make a lot more sense. But so we are not just 3D printers here. We are cosplayers here. Okay. After you print your model, you will find that the model looks like crap. it's full of striations, there's lots of pits, there's lots of holes, the surface is rough. You are not just a plain old person that just does 3D printing that says, oh, I printed this impossible object. We are cosplayers, and we use these things to do things like make earrings, make jewelry, and things like that. So because of that, you finish a 3D print. You have to do some sort of finishing work. So basically, we're going to do post-processing. So basically, we're going to remove things like striation marks, because remember, everything is printed off by a layer, so you will see the layer striations on the sides. You will, as part of this, you will also remove certain printing artifacts caused by printer screw-ups. Even though the print does finish, it may have a few flaws in it, like it's trying to turn a corner, but it kind of over extrudes when it turns around the corner, things like that. Removing your support structures if you use them, or removing a brim or a raft. And of course, you probably want to paint the bottom. I don't think they make filament in the green that I like for some of this stuff. So I don't. Oh, so kind of a side note. There are filaments out there that supposedly are gold filament and things like that, and it's supposed to give like a nice gold or silver color. Don't waste your money on those. They do not work. Once you print them and sand them, all that color is gone. You also have to use the paint. And it's a lot of these. If you're familiar with like a lot of automotive finishing stuff, a lot of the finishing work that you do with this is inspired by that. So let's talk about removing striations. So remember I talked about layers. You have layers. You can actually, if you look depending on how big your layers are, you can sometimes see them from far away. So we will try to remove striation marks. There's several ways you can do it. Sanding will go a long way. There are special paint primers that will fill, that actually are better for filling than for painting. Those are actually a good product you can use to get you part of the way, and you can figure out how much more filling you gotta do. I do know several people that actually have sandblasted their parts. I don't have a sandblaster myself, but I know several people that do have sandblasters. If you did do all of this stuff, you probably would have a sandblaster. But sandblasting is another way of doing it. And there's resin fillers. Like if you know how to use resin, you can actually use resin for filling this. Bondo would be an example of polyester resin, and the West System epoxy, which is what I use for doing striation fillers. So here's the thing. Like support structures, you can orient your part in a way to reduce the number of striations, but a lot of times you can't just totally remove them. That's okay. All right. So, okay. Remember I talked about not recommending certain products. Here's the next one I don't recommend. How many of y'all have heard of XTC 3D? I'm about to blow your bubble here. This product is garbage.
What is it?
XTC 3D is a product that basically is marketed for 3D prints, for basically finishing 3D prints. It claims it's self-leveling, and it basically will remove striations and basically make things all smooth. This product, unfortunately, is garbage.
What's the tube level plastic?
No.
Yeah, there's some YouTubers take that. Like some
Yeah, the cosplay YouTubers, unfortunately.
where the sponsorships talking than actual.
It's the sponsors talking, I'm afraid. The main problem with XTC 3D is its working time. It's also very cheap. That's why a lot of people get it. But the main problem is working time. The only way you're going to get a decent working time is if you do this in the frickin' freezer. Even at like 70 degrees, 60 degrees, I have maybe 10, 15, or 20 second working time. That is barely enough for me to literally slap the thing on, like, you know, when we talk about working time with epoxies, it's when you first mix it up. So I have to quickly mix it up as fast as I can and basically literally just slap it on there. And it's literally to the point where I'm slapping things on and I have to do extra work just to get all the irregularities off. Because of that, XCC 3D, I suppose it on a much colder climate, this actually is a better product. But here in Texas, XCC 3D is pretty much garbage, unfortunately. Well, I got to figure out how the hell you did it, because every time I've used it, it has ruined multiple projects.
It's like a 2-part resin?
It is a 2-part resin, yes. It is an epoxy resin. Also, do not use acetone. Okay, so.
Mention that, like, about using acetone, I just didn't want to bother you with it, you had a slide.
Yeah, so, alright, so actually acetone does have its uses. Like, what a lot of folks will do is they will do what we call an acetone spritz, and basically they mix acetone, put it in the bottle, and basically spray it around to basically kind of smooth things out. The problem with doing it with my projects is that it destroys any tolerances I put into it, because a lot of my stuff fits in very puzzle-like, and acetone has actually melted or destroyed it, even with the spritz. It does not. It is way too strong for me to do it, and I prefer using other methods to do it that are less. Also, acetone also requires certain personal protection as well.
So I got a question. So one of the things I didn't see out there was Mod Podge. So like whenever I'm finishing Warble, I do a Mod Podge before I go filling my primer. So I feel
Yeah.
Mod Podge is
Okay.
better.
Mod Podge may work for PLA. I personally have to not use Mod Podge because I'm going to admit something here. I have never touched Warble, I've never touched foam, and I've never touched EVA foam. So I think that's, yeah.
Mod Podge is great for those. They like if it's
Yeah.
a little too much for
Yeah.
filler primer to take care of, but if it's not so bad that you need an epoxy,
Yeah.
fills that gap real nice.
That's just good on lot.
Yeah. However, Mod Podge will not work on ABS and it will not work on PETG. Those two plastics resist most anything adhesive related. Yeah. So you can't use acetone for what we do. Yeah. Yes.
Just plastic would work as a better.
Plastic dip will work. Yes. Plastic will work. Yes. Plastic dip is also meant to not be permanent anyway. So even if it strips off, it's okay. You can always peel it and start over. ABS is used for if you want to attach two ABS parts together. Acetone is good for that. We kind of call it ABS weld. Yeah. When I show you the stuff I printed out, you'll understand why acetone does not work in my case. Yeah. So now we're going to talk about like just printing artifacts in general. Like a lot of it is like either like little slits where like there's like sometimes the extrusion is not quite there. Like the extruder was partially jammed, but it fixed itself. Or like as I was talking about, like around curves and corners where it sometimes over extrudes. So those can be fixed with fillers, or like if you see those little nubs that work with excessive extrusion, you can use a Dremel tool, some very light sanding to just basically remove it. If those of you who work on props and armor, you know your Dremel tool is perfect for this task. All right, so let's talk about painting. I said, luckily, yes, plastic dip definitely works. I have used plastic dip for this stuff. Luckily, all three of them accept paint very, very well. You should probably, as a good practice, use primer on it before you actually paint it. So all the techniques you use for wood, Warble, foam will also work for 3D printed products. I actually am definitely not an expert at painting. Every time I paint, it's either a plastic dip or a spray paint. So that's FYI. Basically, there are lots of good painting tutorials. So, all right. You will probably want to attach 3D printed parts to other things like non-3D printed parts. So, or you want to attach things to themselves. So, as I said, PLA is the hardest one to finish, but it's the easiest to adhere because there's lots of very cheap glues you can use for attaching PLA parts. Super glue is definitely one of the more popular. I mostly use the super glue, the Loctite GO2 glue, which you can get at Home Depot for about $6, kind of a little gel. It is a polyurethane glue that actually works. I use it for attaching PLA to PVC pipe, which I do a lot. Also epoxy adhesives also work very, very well for PLA. ABS, the only way you can attach them together is to either weld them with acetone or to use epoxy adhesives. That's a big jump from PLA where where you can use a lot of different glues. PETG is a big pain in the rear end to glue. The only glue I found that actually has worked is a product called Cygrip 10. It is an acrylic epoxy. This acrylic epoxy is also about the most toxic glue I've ever encountered. As I said, that glue requires me to use personal protection, with the filters and everything. So you can get this at Amazon, and it is so toxic it's just horrible. So. For the small contests, the bigger contests, it has to go in the past.
So, kind of somewhat related to this,
yeah.
What is the feasibility? So, one of the things I would like to get into is to use the 3D printer to make the pieces to be able to tie down and then attach them to the larger pieces that are going to be.
I'll show you something. Okay. I'll show you something with that application. Yeah. Okay. So, I learned this the hard way. Hot glue does not work on any 3D printed plastic. I've had several accidents because I did not know this. One of them was actually on stage during a cosplay contest. Yeah. So hot glue does not work. I know cosplayers love their hot glue. It will not work. I guarantee you.
Now it's hard to see you, especially. They're like, oh, that's cute. They don't do that.
Nope. All right, so we go to the post-processing part. Let's next section is basically kind of. I didn't have time to go home and grab some of the stuff I printed, but because I was slept this morning, so I'm just show some pictures here. So let's show this example. So here, so you probably familiar with these buttons if I turn them over. These were
the first ones, right?
What?
Are those the first ones?
Yeah, these were the buttons that were used on Eska's sleeve.
Okay.
So he should be familiar. If I turn it over, you'll recognize the buttons right off the bat. Mm-hmm. But basically the way I did it, those are 3D printed, and I actually integrated a well, which I attached this snap. The snap is attached to using the Loctite GO2 glue, and then this is where I sewed it on the actual outfit, and they snap together, and boom, I have decorative buttons that are strong. And here's the thing: after I started 3D printing, I have never had to buy another button at a store ever again. 3D printing is really, really good for making custom buttons of any size and any configuration you want. You can actually even make shank buttons. You'll have to print the shank separately, but you can make shank buttons as well. I usually just use hole buttons. I assume that you know this outfit.
Yes.
Okay, so this outfit has several 3D printed parts on here, but this is the most unusual application of this. In the reference picture, this bustiere had these ribs in it, and it was either me having to do French seams on organza, which is a pain, that are curved, which is the pain we're in, or I stretched this 3D printed cage over, and I stretched organza over this 3D printed cage and attached the cage. It's actually printed white to kind of match everything else. There are actually quite a few 3D printed components on this outfit, but this is the main one. This is the main one. This is the main one that actually this is the main one that is actually kind of unusual. She also has a staff which I didn't bring with me. That's also 3D printed. This was actually printed on this printer. I assume some in this room are familiar with this costume. Okay, so this has several medallions here, and like these two are kind of. I've actually replaced most of this with other parts, but this here, you notice that this is multicolored here. It's just a bunch of stripes. If you look very, very carefully how it's done, it's actually 3 separate pieces. It's just stacked together. And if you notice very carefully, there's actually an internal sleeve that I printed here. And that internal sleeve actually binds everything together and then allows me to glue everything together and everything be in a consistent location. So what I do when I paint this, I basically paint, since I have it 3 separate parts, I just paint this part the gold color. I paint this the green, I paint this the blue, and so it looks like I have nice clean stripes. The reason why I like doing it this way is because every time I've tried to mask things off of masking tape, there's always some sort of a leak or a defect, and that's why I do things this way. These 2 medallions down here, I've actually replaced most of these with a different medallion that I printed on a resin printer. We want to talk about resin printers. We can talk about it after the panel, because resin printers are a whole different animal and requires completely different techniques. And also, this medallion here, if you remember the 2 slides before, it was done using the same technique. There is a little snap underneath it, and then I basically just snap it onto another snap. Okay, so for you, wig styling.
Yes.
Okay, so this is actually a spare clip I'm holding in my hand. I had a character that had buns that went up like this, and I'm definitely not a wig stylist, but I was like, how the heck was I going to do this? And then I was like, wait, I can create a frame, pin it into the wig with bobby pins. There's actually 4 holes around this section here that basically allows me to clip it in.
Even with the elements to your design, you could also affect styling too.
Yeah. When I did this, I did this with PLA, and unfortunately, this wig I have to redo because I left it in the car. I left it in the car, and this is up in Norfolk, Virginia. It was only like 80 degrees, and it was still nothing melted. It melted just enough. I was able to do a temporary repair before I got onto the stage for the costume contest. But it's been permanently ruined, so I have to redo this wig. So this wig here is an Art of Delilah, and so what I did was I took 2 sections, parted it and crossed it over, and I used those 2 parts to basically wrap around this frame. There's actually more stuff that's on this wig here that's not shown on this picture, but basically, as I said, this is 3D printing. You can actually create a lot of specialized structures to help you in wig styling. This is a very, very advanced use of wig styling technique. You will not hear it in most wig styling panels because this is a very, very unusual application. So remember what I was talking about the props taking 300 hours or so? Let's take a look at this.
I had one that was going to pop out, the same discussion.
Yeah, I have to pop up the book girls. So for those of you who are familiar with Cosplay or Contact Collection, as I have Cosplay from Cosplay, and as the 3D printing is kind of marginal in terms of doing things with big weaponry and things like that. So as a reference, that's me. This is kind of like mid-calf here, where the picture's cut off. I'm 6 foot, so you can tell how big this thing is. This thing took 300 hours to print.
Just like stacks of pieces glued together?
bolted together.
How heavy is that?
10 pounds. It used to be 12. It used to be 12, but I did some adjustments with the torpedoes to actually to make it lighter. But as I said, this type of prop is actually the reason why XCC 3D fails and why Acetone fails. There is so much. There are enough. The tolerances would have been destroyed if I used Inacron. I actually did use XCC 3D on the first part of this torpedo launch and it completely ruined it. I literally had to spend hours and hours literally just staining it back to the point where I can actually get it to work again. There's like itty bitty little torpedo doors. There's this little clip here which I actually guide this wig down here. This wig is another Art of Delilah. Unfortunately, I have about 10 of these things. And also, notice the guns I'm holding here. These are naval cannons, and then I actually added a pistol grip onto them. So as I said, there's lots of these are huge, and they're great for doing stuff. But it's like this is kind of a very marginal case where that someone who actually knows how to work with wood can probably do this costume much faster than I can. This.
No, that's what I would use, those for shipping tubes.
This is PVC pipe here. That's the one part you're going to print on the launcher because if you're printing like round cylindrical objects, just use PVC pipe. It's easier. You talk about the attaching armor pieces to other armor pieces. This is an example. Okay, so again, this has a lot of different parts to it here. So you see this bracket back here?
Did you have to bring a harness to where it's yeah?
Yes, there is a harness that's underneath the whole outfit that is, I bought that harness at a BDSM store in Seattle.
I'd say it's sturdy. Be prepared for anything.
It was actually perfect. So when I was designing this outfit, I was trying to figure out how I was going to do this outfit. This was that back bracket with the two guns back here. I was trying to figure out how the heck I was going to attach them and not have it like completely like wobble or break. And then so basically I have this harness that's actually inside. There is an adapter plate, and I bolted through grommets in the outfit. This bracket to the harness. So what happens is it is ridiculously strong. It does still need a bit of a counterweight in order to be totally stable, but that was what the torpedoes down here are
You're less
for.
likely to drown now.
Yeah, the torpedoes here actually also serve as a counterweight. There's two torpedo launchers down here. They're not so obvious, but basically I've used that's how you can use 3D printing to basically make brackets that they can use to attach everything. You can't if you do it this way. This is an application where I would use ABS over PETG or PLA because ABS is stronger, is actually stronger than the other two materials. So as I said, it's done. It's a shell. So while this is done, let's go ahead and I'm gonna remove this off the build plate and pass it around. Come on. There we go. All right. Watch out for sharp surfaces. So obviously I printed the wrap over it. So be careful when you handle this. There are some sharp surfaces here. So feel the part. As you actually feel the part, you'll notice that it's very, very rough. It's very rough. There's a lot of striations. There is so you can tell by this that you will, if you want to use this in some sort of costume, you will need to do some work on it before it is appropriate. And several people should recognize this particular medallion. So going back to this, so this is ABS. And then on top of this, I actually, the epoxy I used on it, I added one more layer on top of that bracket to prevent it from delaminating. And then all the little, it'd be the little naval guns and anti-aircraft guns on here, they're made out of PLA, and there are actually huge metal bolts in here just mounting everything together. The seaplane launcher here, and all the naval guns here, and here, they're also made. The parts here are made out of PLA, and then there's a bushing that I attach the thing through the garment. That's ABS. So I basically am using those two: ABS for string, PLA because I can do more detailed stuff easier. So as I said, this is kind of an example of what you're talking about, using 3D printed parts as kind of a way to attach other parts. I happen to attach other 3D printed parts, but you can also attach armor, pipes, other things with this. This is definitely very good for 3D print is good for making custom attachment points for things. Okay, so I assume several people in this. Okay, understood. I assume several people in this room have compete in cosplay contests. All right. If you're entering a cosplay contest with a 3D printed part, be aware that, remember those 4 steps I talked about: the slicing, the modeling, the printing, the post-processing. You are expected to do all 4 of them. If you don't, didn't do all 4 of them, you need to disclose it, and they basically remove that from consideration. So, if you have a lot of, if your project's all 3D printed, but you have someone to commission it, you may not be able to enter the outfit in the contest because it falls under the percentage made rules. So, and if you don't mention it, you will be disqualified. Ask me how I know.
How do you know?
It's happened.
Well, people do put like on a ban list or something.
Well, let's say the cosplay directors talk to each other.
Yeah, because I know a lot of staff work at other conventions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, most judges will judge your 3D printed out stuff much harder than if you made it out of Warbler wood or EVA foam. Part of it is due to general misunderstanding how 3D printing works, but also on top of that, because of the 3D printing capabilities, you are expected to do better than with Warbler or wood or EVA foam. So if you make it out to the same quality, the handmade one is the one that will win. All right, so another mention. So okay, I talked a lot about this, and like you may be interested in trying to do 3D printing. You don't have to necessarily spend a shit ton of money and buy a 3D printer right then and then. If you have a hackerspace, like here in Austin, we have the ATX hackerspace, you can use these hackerspaces to learn how to do 3D printing. They'll have 3D printers available to you. There will often be classes or seminars showing up front how to use the printers, and you can use these to basically with much smaller cost than buying an actual printer. Just basically learn how to use the printer and figure out all the course before you can make an informed decision on what printer to buy. So basically, once you've worked with a printer, it makes it easier for you to know what to look for in the printer, and you'll know what you want, what's in the budget, what you can do with it. Now, the one caveat to this is because 3D printers are so popular in the makerspace communities, there are often long lines to use the 3D printers, but you can always work around it. So, all right. So, conclusion. So as I said, 3D printing. I was trying to do this in a realistic light as possible, but it is a very interesting technology. But it will not solve all your prop and cosplay problems. 3D printing is as big of a skill as sewing, as making foam, armor, eBay foam, working with Warbler. It is as difficult of a skill as everything else that needs an appropriate amount of time to master. But once you master it, you can do all sorts of really beautiful things with it, and you can effectively make so many custom parts that will improve your cosplays just significantly. All right, any other questions? So as a so thank you for coming. If you guys are on the Facebook group for this convention, I will be posting these slides on the group. I'll be posting it and also put my panel early this morning as well. So if you're missing anything from it, you can. I will also put some comments on each of the slides as well. And thank you for coming. Now I'm going to clean all this up.